Any hour now, this booster either flies or aborts again. Once that sequence starts, nobody in the control room can stop it early. The software decides in real time whether to fly or abort, and it already aborted once this month. 4 engines never lit. Not damaged, not exploded. The countdown simply noticed and refused to fly. 5 stories tonight. A rocket that didn't fly. A humanoid robot company that just told its own regulator the real reason its margins are shrinking. And 3 separate instruments, an orbiting telescope, a radar system, a century of sunspot counts that each caught something no eye could. Leads the rocket? Not because it's the biggest story of the week, because the part everyone's already covered isn't the interesting part. July 16th, Starbase, Texas. Booster 20, super heavy, 33 Raptor 3 engines, reached the final seconds of its countdown for Starship's 13th flight test. Ignition sequence started. 4 engines registered no start at all. Starship's own flight software won't accept a launch missing more than 3 engines, so it held everything that had already lit and called the abort itself. That's the number everyone quoted. The detail I kept coming back to is what happened 6 days earlier, on July 10th. This exact booster fired all 33 engines at once for 24 seconds, the loudest static fire ever recorded at the site by a wide margin. Every engine that failed at T0 had already proven 6 days before that it could light. Something changed in 6 days, on the second ever Block 3 booster ever built. This isn't the first time this exact engine generation has had trouble relighting in a small group. Flight 12's 2 months earlier, the same booster class went from 32 engines down to 5 for its boostback burn and didn't reliably relight all 5. That flight crashed in the Gulf. Different phase of the motion. Initial ignition this time, not a relight. But it's the second flight running where a handful of Raptor 3 engines, out of a much bigger set, didn't do what the rest of the set did. I said 10 days before this that if Thursday's flight went wrong, it wouldn't be the part everyone was watching. The in-space relight Artemis needs for orbital refueling. The physics of relighting one engine in space hadn't changed. I didn't expect wrong to show up before the vehicle even left the ground. Both Ship 40 and Booster 20 came off the pad for inspection. No damage anyone's reported. SpaceX's own count in public is 2 Raptors pulled and replaced. Though engines matching this booster's testing lineage have reportedly turned up at the company's McGregor test site since the kind of detail that suggests the real number ran higher than the headline one. The reason any of this matters past one rocket, buried in Flight 13's own manifest, is a single in-space Raptor relight. That's the exact capability NASA's Artemis 3rd lunar lander needs proven before Starship can start the 10-plus tanker flights that refuel it in orbit. That's context, not the headline. Whatever happens on the retry, that relight test still has to happen. And the last time this vehicle asked several Raptor 3s to relight together, it didn't work. From a machine that didn't fly this month to a company that's already shipped more of itself than anyone else alive. Unitree's G1 humanoid starts around $16,000. Last year alone, Unitree shipped over 5,500 of them, more humanoids than any other company on Earth, and stayed profitable doing it, which almost nothing else in this category manages. The headline this week is 73 days, how long it took Unitree's Shanghai Star Market listing to clear committee review under a fast-track mechanism the exchange only introduced last year. What that number skips is the step that actually matters. The funds clearing registration approval didn't land until a month later, 104 days total. 73 days is real. It's also not the day the company was actually cleared to raise money. The part that isn't in most of this week's coverage is on page 19 of Unitree's own filing. Q1 net profit fell 52.5% year-on-year, even as shipments hit records. In the same paragraph, the company states outright that it deliberately lowered its own prices through 2025, in its own words, to cement its industry position. That's a company telling its regulator on the record that it is running a price war on itself on purpose. The number behind that admission, Humanoid gross margin fell 6 points in a single year, while the average selling price nearly halved. That's not a company losing a price war. That's a company choosing to fight one and showing its own regulator the receipts. The same paragraph names its biggest reason to expect the margin to keep falling, and it isn't a Chinese competitor. It's Tesla. The filing states by name that Optimus Generation 3 has started small batch trial production and lists it as a risk to Unitree's own position. A regulatory filing naming Tesla as a threat is a stronger story than any spokesperson's quote would be. I don't think the numbers here need a Western comparison to matter. A mass-producible general-purpose humanoid running at 1/10 of the going price, shipping in the thousands, and profitable at that price is automation infrastructure, whether or not it ever touches a NASA program. Nobody had to dig for that story. It was sitting in a paragraph anyone could have read. The next 3 stories are the opposite kind of find. Nothing sitting in plain text, only a number an instrument had to catch. TWI 5882 is a sun-like star about 1,300 light-years out, already past the main sequence, a subgiant, the same phase the sun will eventually enter. Stars burn away their birth lithium steadily as they age. This one didn't. Brooke Cotton, lead author on the paper published this year in the Astrophysical Journal, and her team compared TOI 5882's lithium against 61 similar subgiants, matched for age, mass, and temperature. 60 of the 61 had less lithium. Only one star scored higher. On chance alone, that's about a 1.6% result. What actually convinces me here isn't the percentile, it's how many boring explanations they had to eliminate before a planet was the only one left standing. Not a young star that just started out lithium-rich, 4 separate age checks all say this star is old. Not a star manufacturing lithium internally. That mechanism only switches on later in a subgiant's life than this one has reached. Not cosmic rays or a nearby stellar explosion seeding it externally. That leaves an isotope fingerprint this star's spectrum doesn't have. What's left standing? Once the boring explanations are gone, a brown dwarf companion 22 times Jupiter's mass, orbiting every 7 days, close enough to have plausibly kicked a planet inward and into the star at some point. The paper's own estimate for how much mass got swallowed comes out an order of magnitude, and places closer to 2, below what you'd expect if the star had gulped a sun-like clump of raw gas. The only way the numbers worked is if what went in was an actual rocky to icy planet, not a piece of the cloud the star itself formed from. There's no photograph of this, and there never will be. The entire case is built from one star spectrum and a statistics table. The authors themselves call it a compelling candidate, not a closed file. That's the honest version. A 1.6% coincidence, ruled out 4 other ways, is still not the same thing as watching it happen. A star's chemistry took a spectrograph and a statistics table to read. What's next took something blunter, a radar network aimed exactly where the math said, coming up empty, and a real number of quietly misbehaving objects nobody's actually counted. An object called 1998's H2, the designation just encodes the year it turned up, has been catalogued as an ordinary asteroid ever since. On August 28th last year, it made a safe close pass, inside 2 million miles, and NASA's Deep Space Network planned to image it with the Goldstone radar dish at the position 27 years of orbital data said it should be. 27 years of orbital data put it in one spot. The radar found it somewhere else, off by an amount gravity alone can't explain. That gap between predicted and actual position is the entire discovery. Nobody photographed anything unusual first. Farnakia's team measured how big that positional drift was, and it was too large and the wrong shape for an inert rock. That's what sent 3 of the world's biggest optical telescopes looking for a reason. Canada, France, Hawaii, ESO's Danish telescope, and the Very Large Telescope in Chile all caught the same faint tail. Gas venting off warming ice, too dim for any survey telescope to have picked up first. A dark comet, active but never bright enough to announce itself. This isn't the first dark comet found. A 2024 study already named 7 of them. What's actually new here is the method. This one wasn't spotted by anyone noticing a tail. It was caught by a radar system's own prediction quietly failing and an engineer taking that failure seriously instead of writing it off as noise. The obvious next question: how many of the roughly 30,000 other catalogued near-Earth objects are doing the same quiet thing is a real question. It's also the one every other outlet covering this story led with. The more interesting question is the one this story actually answers, not how many are hiding, but how you'd even notice one that is. From a radar network quietly missing an object by a wide margin to a forecast asking to be trusted 7 years before anyone can check it. How much warning is actually enough? Every roughly 11-year solar cycle's most extreme space weather doesn't fade out slowly. Professor Sandra Chapman at Warwick presented work this month showing it stops abruptly at a specific identifiable point in every cycle. She calls it the switch-off. Here's the actual finding, and it's not the switch-off itself, it's what the sunspot count AT that switch-off moment predicts. Checked against the full sunspot record back to the 1700s, 25 cycles deep, the number at switch-off correlates with how strong the next cycle's peak turns out to be, years before that peak happens. Applied backward, the method correctly flags cycle 25 as stronger than the official Nullo-Convene panel's own forecast, the same cycle that produced 2024's Gannon storm Aurora as far south as Mexico. Applied forward, an early read on cycle 26, landing somewhere around a sunspot number of 100 to 120. This isn't the only cycle 26 number in circulation, and I don't want to present it like it is. A separate machine learning forecast, trained on the same historical sunspot record, puts the next cycle nearly twice as high, around 194. Same target cycle, two different methods, two genuinely different answers. What's new about Chapman's number isn't that it exists. It's that it comes from a physical mechanism tied to a specific latitude threshold, not a pattern-matched sequence model. And it arrives with about 7 years of warning instead of needing most of the current cycle's own data first. The paper behind this, published in the Astrophysical Journal weeks before Chapman's own conference talk about it, not an unreviewed preprint, whatever this week's coverage implies, is honest about its own limits. One author, one method, not yet independently repeated by a second team. And Chapman's own 100 to 120 number is explicitly a placeholder for a sharper one. Once cycle 25's actual switch-off is observed instead of estimated, a couple of years from now. Solar cycle 26 is forecast to begin sometime around 2029 to 2032 and peak in the mid-2032, squarely inside the window NASA's own Artemis-era lunar and Mars planning already covers. A 7-year head start on how rough that stretch gets lands before the hardware emission timing decisions lock in. Not after. The retry on Flight 13 is still live as this goes out. Whatever happens, the actual story tonight was never the ignition. It was the two engines nobody's explained yet. That's the pattern all 5 stories share, one way or another. Ignition telemetry, a lithium spectrum, a radar system's own prediction, a century of sunspot counts, even one company's own regulatory filing. Each one carrying something nobody had isolated before, until this week. There's a link below to the first time the station forecast solar cycle 26, back in March. A different method, a different number. This one's the same target, a sharper aim. This has been Stardrift.